My name is Viv Baker, and I'm a postgraduate at Goldsmiths University in London. I'm studying domestic violence and sexual abuse and the long-term effects of trauma. I'm a campaigner for children's rights in the care system. I'd like to take you back to the 1960s onward to the 20th century because many people just assume that sexual abuse and domestic violence is a new reported crime. This is not the case. Back in the 60s, child abuse was just as prevalent as it is today. A lot of domestic and sexual abuse went unreported. Instead, if abuse was reported, then preferred response from the police would be one of two actions. For domestic abuse towards women, she must have deserved it and would tell the woman to behave herself. If sexual abuse towards children or adults, you would be called a liar, fabricator. As a police officer's daughter, I was brought up to respect the police. When I was growing up in the 60s, I was taught to listen and behave with the police because they were the law. I was lucky as I had a wonderful childhood and loving parents. But at the age of 8, my beautiful childhood was about to end abruptly. During the time, I started being groomed by a man who married into the family. He was a trusted man within the household. By the age of 9, I was being sexually abused badly, nearly every day, and my abuser used every excuse and trick to look for every opportunity he could to get me away from the watchful eye of my parents and out of the family home. I was terrified, frightened to tell anyone what was happening to me. This silence allowed my abuser to carry on abusing me till I was 14 years old. At this age, this is when I stopped going to school. My behaviour got so bad that I was out of control. My attendance at school was 20% for the year. I was out of hand and my parents could not understand why. I was sworn to secrecy by my abuser. I was threatened that if I told anyone, my father would lose his job. My mother would give me away and the whole family would hate me. I didn't realise at that time it was called coercive behaviour, grooming. Fear of my parents' future happiness ran through my veins. I decided to protect my family. I'd run away from home. I'd stay anywhere I could, so my abuser could not touch me and my parents would not suffer because of me. At the age of 14, I was taken into the local authority care. My parents had to pay for me to be there. They paid and they knew they had to protect me, but they had no idea from what. The first care setting was 26-week placement to assess whether I return home or move to another home. This was not normal care settings as I was in a confined area. I was not allowed to leave for 26 weeks because it was a treatment centre. It was decided that I was not returning home to my loving family. In a way I was relieved, but in another way I missed my parents and siblings. I was then told that I was going to move to a long-term care centre, a treatment centre. The care home was next door to the larger building with more girls and most of them, well 99%, had been prostitutes. I was not aware of the meaning of the word. It was only when one of the girls within the house told me what they'd been doing, and then I fully understood why the girls were there. The stories they told me were horrific, and as well as being traumatised from my own abuse and leaving my family, their stories frightened me senseless at 14 years old. At the time, I tried to disclose to the staff at the care home what was happening to me. On more than one occasion, I was called a liar, an attention seeker, and the list of nasty words was long, even though the doctor had examined me and confirmed, indeed, I had been abused. Instead of being shown compassion, the staff, they started to abuse me physically, holding me by the throat and lifting me off the floor. I remember 3 full-grown men sitting on me And when I tried to disclose what had happened, one of the male staff made me sit on his lap and tried to touch me. I soon stopped that with a few verbal words, which did not go down well. I was also cut with a razor blade by one of the girls, one on the leg and one on the arm, and I still have the scars some 40 years later. The scars are a physical reminder of the trauma from that time, which lives with you forever. The abuser from the care home continued until I was 16 years old. I had to leave this godforsaken place. I was not allowed to go to school as we were told everything we needed was provided at the home. I only left the home when I went to get clothes accompanied by 3 staff. This was not a caring place. There was no counselling, there was no education. The only thing they offered me was more continual abuse. It took me 35 years after I'd left the place for the police to investigate and some justice was done for others. I myself did not want money, or did I want to go back through the trauma of reliving them horrific memories that attached to my experiences under the local authorities' care. It took me 35 years for justice to be served and many years for our voices to be heard. The traumas impacted me on my body. In 2012 to 2014, I was in a wheelchair as my immune system was very weak. The years of abuse had left me suffering physically, and I believe many others who have been subjected to childhood abuse often suffer in similar ways later on in life. They say it takes 30 years for trauma to come out in the body. This is a price that many abused victims have to pay, unfortunately. Fast forward to 2020. I became re-traumatized as history repeated itself in the form of intergenerational trauma. I found that child abuse had damaged me physically and led me having traumatic births. 3 of my children have diagnosed dyslexia, autism, ADHD and other comorbid conditions which overlap with anxiety and depression. Unfortunately, my own daughter had traumatic birth on her son. He was left black and blue as he was left without oxygen for around 4 minutes. I saw the birth and I believe both had PTSD from it. Even I was traumatized through watching it. Unfortunately, no support was given to either mother or son. Instead, parental blame was attributed for speech and language problems and regressive behaviours, which I recognise as signs of neurodiversion. Instead of understanding the history, educational settings were not up to date in the current research, and the school referred the children onto social services. They did not understand his behaviour. The local authorities did not listen, but ignored common sense, and very soon those children were removed with no evidence apart from suspicion, speculation of possible future harm. There is nothing I could have done or anybody else. With all the knowledge I had on autism, a master's in autism, trauma, there was no reasoning or accountability. We then had evidence of abuse in the care system towards the children. Children are still being abused with no accountability. No thought for the child or children or families. How can this still be going on? The children's law needs to be looked at with a fresh set of eyes. The Children's Law 1989 is unfit for purpose and is outdated. In my opinion, the children are being removed to make profit for the government. Parents are judged on such things as reduced mental health, home education, single parents, and many more things. It appears that everyone who costs them money will become a target, and some social workers practice without recognised qualification. There is still no accountability when it comes to the local authorities. Children are still being abused in the foster care, and it all comes down to money and the big private companies, the highest bidders. Does one social worker own an 11 care homes sound right? No, it doesn't sound right to me either, especially as the children are not being taught by qualified teachers, but are subjected to physical abuse like I had to endure over 40 years ago. There needs accountability for all the damage that has been done, firstly to the children and secondly to the families.